And it also means that apps in general and games, they just have to be better quality because the CPI is what the CPI is. And you got to build something that delivers enough ARPU to back your CPI.
Hello and welcome to Mobile Heroes Uncensored, episode 20. My name is John Katsir. My co-host is Peggy Insults. This is Mobile Heroes Uncensored Origin Stories. Every hero has an origin story, sometimes dark and depressing, and sometimes wonderful and uplifting. Mobile heroes are no different. And today we are meeting with somebody very special. Who are we meeting with?
Well, John, we have Lenette Yap, Senior User Acquisition Manager at Inkitt, which, if you don't know it, it's a mobile app that publishes novels and books from Indian popular authors. So Lynette is deeply curious, not just about reading, which she does a lot of, but she loves exploring data, digging into the nuts and bolts of how UA works. So she gets down in the weeds, how to tackle UA challenges. She also loves cooking, karaoke, and has an incredibly cute poodle that I don't know we will see. There we go. We got the poodle, the real Dogtor Dre. Will not go there. Pun pun intended. Interestingly, I always take a look, John, at who we have really, right? Her
Mhm.
colleagues adore her almost as much as her dog. They call her whip smart and add that she has a deep passion to organize processes before diving into the deep ocean of data. And once you are in a boat with her, you realize how deep her understanding is on the subject. So, in that, I would say, John, we dive in with Lynette.
Wow, wow. With the boat analogy, I was like, Are we in deep water here? Is it very stormy? Is it good? That's wonderful. Welcome, Lynette. So good to meet you and so good to meet Dr. Dre. We have to start here. We were going to do this show a week ago, but you had a COVID scare. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I had my best friend visit from Barcelona, so we were just in my tiny apartment for 3 days. And then when he went back, the first news I heard from him was that, "Hey, I got COVID," and we were at the dinner with like five of his other friends, two of which got COVID, and one of the wives got COVID too. So yeah, and then what I got was a really bad case of the cold. Thankfully, I got really, really sick and I lost my voice for over 2 weeks. I think I was supposed to speak with Peggy, and then she told me, I don't know that you want to be remembered with this voice, so we can make the podcast like a week later.
Well, we're happy that you can speak now. We're happy that you didn't actually have COVID and you tested negative for it. That's a wonderful thing. Thank you for making it on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, we have to ask you, we know what your colleagues think of you, and we know what you've done in mobile marketing, but hey, you have to start somewhere. You have to say, I want to go into mobile marketing. How did you start in the space?
Oh, yeah, that's kind of like an interesting story. So my background is in banking and finance, and I did it for like 7 years in school. So my first job right out the gate was at a bank, but it was really, really boring. And I realized that so I've always been a gamer. Not right now, but for most of my studying life, and also like I think up to like 5 years ago, I've always been playing like the strategy mobile games. What I love about them is that they're just like so fluid and, like it's just like moving strategy. So I'm a very chaotic person. I just like chaotic games with a bit of structure. So I found myself just playing games like, after work and felt like I had two full-time jobs, one of which I didn't like, which was, thinking part. So then one day I just quit, and there was this company called Garena down in Singapore that was the main publisher for PC video games, and they did Heroes of New Earth, which was like something I was playing like every day for like many hours, and so I just applied to them, and I got hired as a person to like organize esport events as well as to work on like the product marketing side of things. So that's how I got started. And then I realized from doing that I really like the creative aspect. Um, in games, just literally anything goes. Like there's not so many like branding rules. So if you have a good idea, you can just run with it. Then I realized that I really like the analytics and paid marketing part of it. There's something about spending money that's just really fun. So then I figured that okay, at oh yeah, and that point and at that point I got hooked on a mobile game. It was Jelly Splash by Vuga.
Mhm.
So and, and then I started realizing that I'm spending way more money on mobile games than I am on my PC games. And that made me think that, hey, like, there's money in this industry. So that's where I'm gonna go. And then I applied to any mocha brands, which was in Hong Kong. And I liked it. And, it's been 7 years that I've worked at Muga, Wargaming, and now I'm at a startup. So all of them have been different verticals, marketing, casual games, puzzle games, hidden object games, like hardcore war games with like tanks and warships. And right now, like indie otters. So I I really enjoy like how having good marketing fundamentals and apply it to different verticals. It's like so similar and so different at the same time. It's very challenging, and that's the part that I love the most.
So you love the challenge. You like a little bit of chaos. So you're in a good place with games because that's where you're going to get both. I sort of get a feel for why you are still in mobile marketing, but I haven't gotten quite the entire answer, Lynette. What keeps you there in the space?
Mm, I think it's just that like with every product that you work with, the same strategy like never works twice. So even for like let's say back then like Pearl's Peril and June's Journey, right? They are very, very similar games. But like at the end of the day, like every campaign is kind of unique and your approach is kind of unique. The storyline's different and your audience are kind of the same, but also kind of different. I don't know how else to put it, but there's always something fresh. You never get stuck, and the industry is changing all the time. Especially right now with like the whole like iOS 14 zero IDFAs, and then Google potentially taking that away as well. Like it's it's gotten into like this like how should I say like it feels like every few years, everything gets kind of taken apart, and then everyone gets back on the same playing field, and we'll see like who gets there first. And even when I would say like before iOS 14, like it's been very performance marketing has been very stable for a long time, but yet we can always find things that work better. Um, Programmatic was on the rise, and that was something new. um, and yeah, I guess just finding different ways to work with network, given like the first party data, and trying to see like how that all fits into whatever kind of attribution that you're working with. Yeah.
That is a great segue into what we want to talk about next because we want to talk about data and mobile marketing in 2021. And as you said, like everything gets torn apart, rebuilt, and then there's this period of stability, right? And so a few years ago, everything was pretty simple. You got an IDFA, maybe you got an Android ad ID, you got your data, we optimized, whether it was right or not, whether you believed in the last click or not, right? We're now entering a more complicated reality where you're going to look at multiple different data sets, right? What data matters now when measuring marketing?
um, I think like I think I'll look at it like from two different ways, right? So first of all, with last click methodology, and methodology is just a methodology, and you kind of work with the uh what's it called, the pros and cons of it. With last click methodology, it just basically means that whatever network that and whatever campaign ad that had the last click gets 100% of the credit, right?
Mhm.
So like science has always had like an advantage, but then with like an MMP in place, then it applies that last click methodology among all your networks. So then you just like measure using the same stick. I'm not saying like trust your methodology, but I'm saying like make your campaign structure work for the last click methodology that you're doing. So in for example, with last click methodology, you know that there's going to be a lot of overlap. If you had like three of the same campaigns targeting the same audience, and like all of those users who were exposed to the campaign have a chance to see an ad from three different campaigns, but only one of them is going to get like the install, and hence whatever post install stuff comes after, right? Like payers and ROAS. So what you want to do is to make the structure work for that. So you want to reduce overlaps. You want to make sure that you're targeting in like clear segments that make sense, and to understand that overlaps is something that you should always reduce, but it will also um, always exist, right? So it's just it's just one of those things that it exists, and unless you have tons of investment available to look into things like incrementality and do like uplift studies and all of that, I would say that you don't go down the rabbit hole too far. You pick what is relevant and you stick with those.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, right? Because I mean, some people are going away from last click, and we'll get into that a little later. We'll talk about what Google's trying to do, probably what Facebook is trying to do as well. But on the iOS side, SK Ad Network is last click. There are, loser postbacks. You see some ads that did not convert or were not at least the last ones that converted. So you have some sense of perhaps some user journey, some customer journey there. And we see that Facebook is moving towards providing the Google Play Refer, which is going to be very, very interesting as well, right? That's almost the last click, also, right? So it is interesting. You can make the methodology work as long as the measuring stick is the same as what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. And also, when the IDFA and Google Ad ID goes away, right? Um, it's going to be really, really hard to sort of like split credit where credit's due for that one user. So,
Yeah.
so I do, so I think the so I think the new strategy will be to look at like first party data and first party IDs, and try to sort of like merge that with either your uh internal database, like how you hang your users, whether it is with like a specific user account or like by specific devices, to try to match the data that you get from the network to the users internally, and then try to find ways to send postbacks back to the network so that they can optimize better.
Mm-hmm.
And if you cannot do a user level targeting, right, then I guess you got to think of it um, in buckets. Like, is it
Yep.
an interest targeting? Like,
Yep.
is it possible to build lookalike audiences, not using IDFA or Google Ad IDs, but some other first party data from the network itself? So I guess, yeah, so I guess it's going to be like a differentiated strategy per network, depending on like what their algorithms is and how they optimize and target.
That is really interesting, actually, because of course you can understand a little bit of what your users are, what they do. You can ask them a little bit about themselves. You can understand a little bit of the demographics and everything like that. And you see the emerging platforms, titans of ad tech, I'm calling them, that are acquiring more and more inventory, acquiring more and more capability. And within their own ecosystems, they've got plenty of first party data. And you could say, I'm looking for users like these. And now, whether they target contextually or whether they target according to some identifier that they have, that's their call, but you've done your job. That's an interesting way to go, Peggy.
It is. And I'm hearing a lot of people say, well, we'll just go look again at that device data. All of a sudden, what we thought wasn't going to be as interesting to be looking at, that's new factor here. I mean, you can debate whether or not that's going to be so deciding, but I think we're all hoping for every data point playing a role in this equation. I don't know if altitude is going to help figure out the bucket, but I'm hearing
I'm
all
targeting mountain climbers. There
the
we go.
anything, all counts. All data is good data, which brings me to your blog, by the way. It's all those data points, Lynette. It gets dizzying. But you made the point, and this was pretty cool. I mean, all the blogs are good, right? John on the Mobile Heroes website.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But this was cool because you are going to challenge us to look beyond the data, and you're actually going to tell us about the role of intuition, which is for some data-driven marketers right now, they need some therapy for this one because you're saying data-informed intuition, and that has a role in their job, in their work. What do you mean by that?
Well, so the way I think about marketing is always like in terms of key metrics, right? There's ROAS, there's CPI, and there's IPM. So ROAS tells you like the return on your ad spend. CPI is the cost of acquiring per individual user. Then you also have like CPA, which might be like cost per payer or cost per subscriber. And then IPM, which is like installs per thousand impressions, basically tells you how many users that you're gonna be able to buy from how much 1,000 impression costs per, eCPM. So then the higher your IPM is, the lower your CPI is. So let's say that you have a campaign that's already like great at finding payers, and we just make the assumption that the user quality is going to be the same. And so in order to get like higher ROAS, then you need to start looking at contextual metrics. You got to start getting your IPM higher, or you got to start fine tuning your creatives to make it more relevant to people who would like play and pay for your game. If you know what I mean. So using like all these like more soft qualitative things to try to get your metrics higher, make your costs lower, and like assuming that's like with every game, there's always going to be like sort of like a LTV model, that there's going to be an expected ARPU or an RPPU of how much a user or a payer is worth to you. And then as your job as a mobile marketer, after we have after you determine like what to do with or without the IDFAs, and once you get a set of data that you're happy to work with, then it's all about like massaging the numbers and figure out what kind of levers you can pull to get your costs lower, uh, like engagement rates higher, and and that's how we make a campaign profitable.
It sounds like a formula, but there are a couple places in there where it's like, an assumption, a premise, whatever. We'll call them hunches. Marketers have hunches. Data is not always conclusive, and I've had conversations with people. Well, what do you do when it's 49 and 51? Can't really make a call on that one. So they do have hunches. Should they be trusting them?
I think they can always test them. Like you can always like uh, iterate your test, right? So let's say you have a test one and there's a few winners, and then down the line you have some more potentials. You can test them together, and then let's sort of like at this point you kind of have to rely on how effective the algorithm is to serve the right ad to the right user. And then I think it's not so much of looking for like trying to decide between like a 49 or 51%, but rather thinking about keeping your top 10% and cutting out your bottom like 20%
Mhm.
per se.
Hmm.
Love that.
There's the formula. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about A/B testing since you brought it up. That's gone through some iterations, right? We've had frankly, we've had some years, Peggy, where pretty much any answer that a marketer would give us when we ask questions, well, we'll test it, right? It's like I'm not allowing that answer anymore because it's
Okay.
just too easy. We'll throw money at it, we'll test it. But A/B testing has gone through some change. At one point, as I was saying, we're testing everything all the time. Now it's a bit more clear that if you A/B test everything, sometimes you can find local maxima that do not make your app successful, do not make your overall revenue increase. You optimized one small piece and the big picture, unfortunately, didn't get optimized. So you've said that no A/B test is really clean. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think what I mean by that is that if you run an A/B test on Facebook, right? The way I see it is that the function of the A/B test is just there to reduce overlap. So it's just there to make your data more clean. But the same user that you targeted on Facebook might also be seeing your ads elsewhere.
Mhm,
So there's never like a true A/B test, but rather it's more like, of the set of ads that I am showing uh, on this network to the set of users who are live at this time, which one is, you know, um, performing better, like relatively.
mhm, mhm.
So that's what I meant when I said there's no true A/B test, because that you're just not able to like absolutely separate everything.
Absolutely, and that makes a ton of sense, right? Because, I mean, people aren't robots, and we don't make decisions on just one piece of data. Sometimes we bring our own preconceptions to it. Sometimes there's 5 or 6 different things that lead to a decision, and we actually press to install something. So w what's the right place? What's the right role for A/B testing?
I think I think A/B testing, like for me, A/B testing, I always just use it as a way to make sure that people who see A don't see B. And for myself, like I don't really care that much about significance because like it just takes like way too much money and way too long to get there. Um, and I think in performance marketing, like, unless your app or game is like running at really, really large scale and you can get there really quickly, right? We're looking for like sometimes quick wins or just like quick insights to sort of drive your strategy further. Um
I think she's saying, Peggy, that she's using A/B testing to ensure that she's not doing something stupid. She's not
Yeah.
insane. That ad, it's okay, it works.
Yeah, it works. And hey, you don't have to spend a ton of money. You really don't on statistical significance. I mean, you can, but what does that mean? And it's a moving target now, anyway, John. I mean, what would the sense really be, right? You
Yeah,
also,
and the network algorithm like plays a part, right? Like
Mm,
as you run the test, the algorithm also runs in the background, whether it be optimizing for installs or payers. Like for example, if you ran a creative test, like in an A/B test, but your device targeting doesn't fit your app, right? Let's say your app requires like 7.0 above to run properly, and then you're targeting like 2.0 or something, like what you're going to see over time is that every creator, whether it be winning or losing, it's going to have an increasing IPM because the install rate is getting optimized. The network filters out the people who don't open your app successfully.
yeah, that makes you think. You have a self fulfilling prophecy in a way, don't you? It's like, hey, I optimized, but actually you didn't.
Yeah, so I guess I wouldn't just sweat it so much. I always just look for the top few percentage, and then just keep running them in like subsequent tests. And if you just, drop the tiny details and look at the big pictures, right?
Mm.
Always, across most of the networks, unless you're super niche or specific, like native ads, or some networks that feature that favor user generated content, you would realize that the creatives that succeed on like the top 10, 20% are always kind of the same, and the ways that you get them to perform on each individual network, sometimes it just works right away, or sometimes you need to make a little bit of uh, like changes so that your ad shows nicely within the placement.
There's a lot of wisdom there, Peggy. I kind of like that. I mean, not sweating all the details, looking for directional accuracy, looking to get a little bit closer. What is there a clear winner here? Is there a clear loser here? Drop that out. There we go. That makes some sense.
I like it. It's like testing as a reality check is what I'm
Yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know? Not to look for, like, for the nuggets and do the and find the gems, but to, like, keep on track. Am I looking at the right is it validating my hypothesis? Is it working with my strategy? You're great on details, Lynette. And in your blog, you also dive into a couple of them. I think John might think slightly, because he thinks of this with me, slightly geeky. But, naming conventions, those types of principles, they are important. But why do you think they're important? Why is that key when we're talking about the testing, the data, the informed intuition?
I think naming conventions are super important just for very logical reasons. That sometimes you want to slice and dice your data in bigger bits. So you're wanting to look at campaign groups or network groups and et cetera, et cetera. Um and I guess if you're doing something like interest targeting across like different various networks, right? If you don't have it in your name, then it's going to get very tricky to try to split things out. Like for example, if you're running like both app campaigns and web to app campaigns or some like web campaigns on one network, you want to find a way to try to like slice it out. It's just like how in the past, like we always make sure to have like the country and and the OS and whatever is important in the name, because like back then like it was just I guess like MMPs uh didn't have like as many like server to server connections to networks where they can pull out the data directly. So
Hmm.
even now, I guess it's for like personal organization, right? So you can look at it and know exactly what's in the campaign without digging into the settings.
Hmm.
Makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. It's another way that you can separate, you can group, you can check, you can see what's working, what's not working. Let's go back to last click attribution for a moment. Google recently published something on that, and spoiler alert, they don't like it. This is a shock, actually, given that Google, especially in mobile, has been exclusively last click. But now they're going to something called data driven attribution, which you may not have heard about in attribution model school. At least I didn't, because no way it hasn't existed to this point. It's some form of multi-touch attribution. However, you've talked about how you can make last click attribution work. Let's move beyond there for a moment. Let's assume we're 2 years out. Let's assume we've got some privacy safe way of understanding more of the user journey, more of the customer journey. Is that valuable to you? Can you work with that? What are you excited about potentially in a reality that looks like that?
Can you tell me a little bit more about like data driven modeling? How is it different from last click? I did see that in an email, but I haven't read into it yet.
No worries. Google published a blog post about what they call data driven attribution, which is going to be the future. It's not last click anymore. And essentially, it is modeling. Essentially, it is we're going to take as many data points as we can get within,
Mhm.
of course, the Google universe, right? Which has its limits. It's vast, but it has its limits, just like Facebook is vast, but has its limits. We're going to take all the data points we can get, and then we're going to do some modeling. And of course, modeling is important in privacy safe methodologies of attribution. So if you look at SKAd network, you've got privacy thresholds, right? So you've got censorship
Mhm.
of, anything under 30 installs per campaign, you won't see, right? So you have to get into modeling. So I think it's modeling with a bunch of data points, but they didn't specify exactly what it is. I guess the question to you is, if you had to move past last click and you're moving into something that was either probabilistic, like media mix modeling or incrementality, or something that's modeled based on some deterministic data and some assumptions. Do you get excited about a reality like that? Do you think that that could be better for mobile marketers?
Well, whether it's better or not remains to be seen. But I always believe that like if we can make last click, attribution work, it just takes time to like figure out how exactly to work with data driven modeling, what it's based on, and what do we need to feed into that thing to make it work. And
Yes.
if we're talking about modeling, I guess and then it puts like a focus on the customer journey, as you said, because no longer that you can just feed. It's also like it also kind of fits in with like what iOS has done, right? There's no magic wand to target good users anymore.
You
So
are 100% right. There is no magic wand. There's no magic wand for targeting. There's no magic wand for even attribution anymore to a large extent. And the challenge for any individual platform that's modeling is they only see what they see. They don't see the other realities, right? So there are some challenges there, Peggy.
And another point I was just thinking, because I will be slightly devil's advocate here, but she said it depends on what we feed it. But then what is it learning from her, right? There's that other side of it where you're making it smarter through all of your campaigns. So it's figuring it out from these data points, but ultimately the model might be something that's evolving the more people like Lynette are feeding it.
Oh, there's no doubt
Right.
about that. I mean, you remember
Yeah.
the early days of UAC on Google?
Yeah. Oh,
Holy cow. People would spend millions of dollars and get utter horrific results, and they'd be up in arms. I mean, the nasty feedback that Google got when they introduced UAC. Wow.
it was just like, well, we're teaching it. Yeah, that's an easy lesson. We paid
Yes.
for it though.
Yes.
They got it. We paid for it. I will not go there, but she made me think about that. You really, Lynette, you did, because that's what's also a question here, and that future. And speaking of the future, I mean, you just got over your scare. It wasn't COVID, but you sounded horrible on the phone. I have to say, I was like, "You're not coming on the show," because then we have to just wait and rent it on Halloween, because it would have just been this horrible hoarse voice. So you did get over that. You're with us now. You're back at your job. What's next?
yeah, I did sound a little bit like Johnny Cash, I guess. Uh,
Really? Okay. Let's
I
try
would
getting
like to sound like Johnny Cash, but I don't want the cold.
yeah, it was a little deep. It was a little deep. It was a little, interesting, but
yeah. Oh, well, I want to say that, like like your previous point about the data driven stuff, right? I guess we need to look closer at like what kind of events, like if we don't have use like IDFAs and just revenue data per IDFA anymore. We need to think about like what kind of events that we're setting up in our app and how that correlates to revenue,
Mm,
and probably since purchase events are probably not enough anymore, that we need to think about like what events people take to become a payer, and whether there are any differences between the behavior of like a whale or like a small payer,
mm,
and
mm.
try to, yeah, and always make sure to to set it up so that the network that you're using is getting like all of the data, because like looking at UIC, right, it didn't just magically work. Like it
Yeah.
worked because they've got a lot of first party data on the users, and because that whatever um events you select to optimize on is relevant enough and large enough to send the right signals.
mhm.
That makes a ton of sense, Lynette. There's a lot of wisdom in that. And I think the challenge for SKI Network has been that people have learned that they pretty much have to go on a 24-hour post back time frame, and they have to feed that back to their ad networks very, very quickly, so that their ad networks targeting and modeling can learn and get better and get faster. And that's been a challenging time. I mean, if we see the results, Snap missed their revenue. Their stock is down 22% today, right? And on that news, Twitter's stock is down 7%, Facebook stock is down 7%, right? Because our ability to target has depreciated.
Yes.
Yeah, and it also means that like apps in general and games, they just have to be better quality because the CPI is what the CPI is, and you got to build something that delivers enough ARPU to back your CPI. Yeah.
100%. Yep.
We're back to product and marketing again, John. We hear it all the time.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Absolutely. Well, Lynette, this has been so much fun. It's been a real pleasure meeting you, and chatting with you. It's also been a real pleasure chatting with somebody who is deep in the numbers and deep in the models, but also wants to bring out the I've got a hunch. I've got some creativity. I think I'll go here, and directionally the data is saying that, and so you're adding some of the creativity and some of the instinct into the data-driven part of marketing. Really do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's great to have you, Lynette. And as I said before when we were talking, intuition, bringing that back to John's point, that does have a role to play in the science of marketing and the art of creative. There's a place for that. So be a champion for it. I support you 100%.
Absolutely. And for everybody else who is watching, are you a mobile hero? I mean, probably you are. But does anybody know? Maybe they should know. You should get in touch with Peggy. You should get in touch with me. And maybe you will be the next person on this show. Until next time, this is Junkets here and Peggy for Mobile Heroes Uncensored.